Hall of Fame broadcaster Marty Brenneman here, and he's the best storyteller in the game, and it's time to sit back, relax, and have some laughs. Welcome to the mayor's office, and here's your host, Sean Casey.
Wow, Sean. Big time, bro. What was that? Who was that?
Hey, when you got Marty Brenneman bringing your show in, you know you've made it, okay?
Yeah. Not only
But I'll
that.
tell you what, Chinch,
Exactly.
what's so funny, man, is, you know, Marty said the best storyteller. I think the guy we have on today might be the best storyteller in baseball history. So, you know, I believe me, I spent a lot of time with this guy.
Yeah.
I want to go into it before we bring him in. I want to go into some numbers that are like, when I knew he was coming on, I was like, my head is spinning. But one of the things is this guy's one of the most humble guys ever. So he's not going to say it. So I got to say it because I know he won't say it. So let's start right here.
Okay.
1,879 regular season games, played 15 years in the big leagues, 293 career average with 422 doubles. That's a ton of doubles. I'll tell you that. I hit 302, and I'm like, I hit 320 doubles. I was like, yeah, that's a lot. Then I just saw Berkey. I'm like, 422 doubles, 366 bombs, over 1,200 ribbies, a 943 OPS, elite OPS. Won the World Series, went to the World Series with the Astros in 2005. And we'll talk about the World Series in 2011, where he came up with one of the biggest hits probably in World Series in Cardinal history. 52 postseason games. He had 317 with 9 bombs, 41 ribbies, and over 1,000 OPS in 11 World Series games. Pretty good stuff. In the 2000s, Lance Berkman ranked in the top 5 in the National League in multiple categories, including second in RBIs, third in total bases, walks, doubles, and runs, fourth in homers, on base percentage, and OPS, sixth in slugging. There's so many things here, Berkey. Like this list is almost ridiculous, but I just want to I'm going to bring it in, and we're just going to keep talking about how awesome you are as a human being and as a player. So, my good friend Lance Berkman, thanks for joining us.
Cheers again.
Round of applause in the mayor's office, bro.
Well, that was quite an introduction. I certainly appreciate it, but yeah, it's kind of embarrassing too.
Why, embarrassing being one of the best players of all time? Yeah, I'm sure that is, brother. Yeah. Jeez. Hey, Berkey, what are you doing nowadays, man? What is Lance Berkman doing? Like, you know, I mean, break it down for us. How's the family, and what's going on in Lance Berkman's life?
Well, pretty much, I'm coaching, and that seems like what I'm 24/7. I took a job as the head coach at Houston Baptist University here in Houston. It's a Division I program, and you know, just there's a lot that goes into that, fundraising and recruiting, and you know, now we're into our fall schedule, so every day we're playing inter-squad games, and you know, just trying to figure out what we've got and see how we can best organize it so that we have a chance this spring to be a pretty good team.
Dude, I'm fascinated by that because I got kids running around. I know you got kids running around too, like doing things, activities, and all that stuff. Like, how did you decide to become a college coach? And like, has that been always a dream of yours to be a college coach?
Yeah, you know, I definitely always thought that was what I would love to do after I got done playing. And then as I got towards the end of my career, you know, I realized, hey, you know, my motivation for coming to the ballpark is really to help the younger players and to, you know, try to pass on the things that I've learned in the game and in life and trying to help those guys. And that gave me a great deal of satisfaction. So I knew that I wanted to coach when I got out and coached for 4 years in high school and enjoyed that experience, but was really ready for maybe a little higher level of player, guys that I felt like I could help, you know, maybe get ready to play pro ball. Love the college game. It's kind of the highest level that you can go where guys are still 100% playing for the team. You know, the pro ball by necessity, there's a selfish element to it where guys are sort of their own franchise, and they really have to be. It's not an indictment against those guys. It's just the nature of the professional game. But in college, you know, the kids are still playing for the school and for each other, and you know, you can still bunt and you can still do some things, you know, that make the game interesting, in my opinion. And so it's a great level. And the other side of that is I love being in a position of influence on these guys as they're at a pivotal time in their life. You know, when you get away from home for the first time and you're sort of making the transition from boyhood to manhood and having an influential figure that can help you navigate some of those waters that at times are difficult. I really get a thrill out of that. So that's a big part of my motivation for wanting to coach.
Is that the main? I'm sorry. Is that the main example of why you think it's good for kids to go to college? Because there's a whole school of professional coaches and baseball people that say, "Don't go to college. It's going to ruin your pro career if you're that good." Like, what do you tell those guys?
Well, I think it just depends on where you go. I mean, there are certainly, I think there are some anecdotal things that you could point to where, and again, you get it because college coach's job is to win, and his salary is based on his winning percentage many times, and so they're not as cautious as they should be with some guys' arms and things of that nature. But I will say this: if you get with a good college program where, there's a lot of them out there where guys really understand development, you're actually probably further ahead coming out of college than you would be if you went right out of high school. The low minor leagues is a very difficult environment, and you go into college. Let me say this: if I had a son and he was not a first-round draft choice, he would be going to college. In the first round, you can make life-changing money nowadays, and so, of course, guys that are that good would have to take advantage of that. But for the vast majority of kids, I like the college experience because it's a good buffer before they really get out on their own. And a lot of times that those low minor leagues and going right into pro ball out of high school can eat some kids up. So I think the college level is a great transition period. And it can, if you get in the right program, it can really help you developmentally.
Berkey, I just think you're the perfect guy to be a college coach, a perfect guy to influence young men. And I always think about, if I was a head coach, what would be one of the number one things I would do? And I think about the culture that I'm creating. So for Lance Berkman coming into Houston Baptist, what's the culture that you're looking to create in that clubhouse for those guys, for those young men?
Well, we've tried to come up with a little acronym that I think I would like for it to reflect how we go about our business, baseball-wise especially, and no disrespect to anybody that's ever been in an actual war, because we like to draw those metaphors to war, but it's certainly sports are nothing like actual combat, and I'm not trying to make light of that, but it's something that sounds sort of tough. It sounds kind of it evokes those emotions that you want from your players, and it's also easy to remember. So our acronym is WAR. And the W in WAR stands for work. So we want guys that are willing to work, that are willing to develop their skills and put in, the extra time that it takes just outside of practice, working on their own to better their craft. The A is aggression. I like guys to play with aggression. And a part of aggression is understanding what has to happen on the field. And so, you got to know what your job is in order to be able to do it in an efficient manner. And so that all goes into aggression. And aggression is also a great antidote for fear that everybody experiences in competition. So we want guys, if they make mistakes, to do it aggressively and not passively. And R is responsibility. And so we want to take responsibility for everything that happens. It's not the umpire's fault. It's not the weather. It's not, any number of factors. You own your own mistakes. And the beauty of what we've got going is that we encourage guys, after you work, play aggressively, you take responsibility for what happens, and then you analyze that, and if something needs to be fixed, you go back to work. So it kind of works in a circle, and that's what we're trying to instill in our guys, and there's other things too, like as example today, I call it Gratitude Tuesday, so I want guys to reflect on the things they're thankful for, and just the great thing about the college game is you really can invest in that culture, building that culture, and it's important, and guys buy in, and so it makes it fun, and you're also teaching life lessons through the game, and I tell these guys all the time, it doesn't matter if we're playing baseball or you go out into the real world and get a job, these same principles apply. They'll make you a successful person if you're dedicated to them.
I love that. First off, I'm gonna steal that Gratitude Tuesday. I will say, hey, Lance Berkman does Gratitude Tuesday, so I'm gonna start doing that. But
yeah,
I love gratitude, and I love responsibility. I think those are great, and working hard. The aggressive one I love because I know for me as a hitter, it was like a calm aggression, right? Like I gotta be ready to hit. Yes. I'm swinging until my eyes tell me no. Bro, we've had some of my favorite conversations about hitting have been with you. And I always admired you as a hitter, just how aggressive you were. You were a switch hitter, which first off is not easy to do, but you were really comparable on both sides. You had a lot of success from both sides of the plate. You had some of the best hands I've ever seen anyone ever have. So you have an opportunity not only with these young men to create that culture, as hitters, when your hitters come in, what are 2 or 3 of the things that you really talk about to these guys that are almost non-negotiables? We got to do this as hitter. What are you teaching your guys when they come in?
Well, the number one thing to me is bat path. I mean, it's having what you and I would consider a level swing. I mean, that's what they used to talk about. And of course, the reason they call it a level swing is because before all the high-speed video, when you watch a guy just swing in real time, the swing looks level. It looks like it's not steeply up or steeply down. And I know in recent days, there's been a lot of emphasis on getting the ball in the air and launch angle and those type things. And unfortunately, if you say that to a major league hitter that has some understanding of how a swing works, they can put loft in their swing or take it away sort of at will. But when you say that to an amateur hitter, many times the first thing they do is collapse the backside and they're swinging straight up to the top of the cage. Yeah. And, they don't have an on-plane swing. So their timing has to be absolutely perfect in order for them to have success. And so, the first thing I talk about with them is the reason we want to have a swing that's level or an on-plane swing, or another way to say it is I want to keep the barrel behind the ball as long as I possibly can. And most fastballs or most pitches, fastballs especially, are coming at a 9 to 11 degree down angle from the pitcher, so our swing needs to be 9 to 11 degrees, maybe up to 15 degrees up, but really that's not much. It's not up. It looks level. So I try to get them to understand, it's barrel behind the ball for a long time that buys the margin of error, because the higher level you go, the better the pitchers are at disrupting your timing. So you have to be able to get hits when you're not perfectly on time. And so, you watch the guys that hit for a high average in the major leagues, every single one of them, has a level swing. You just have to, because you got to be able to get, when I work with minor league guys, I ask them, I said, in the course of 500 plate appearances, how many times are you perfectly on time, where everything works right and, the ball's right where you expect it to be? And it's probably 50, 60 times maybe during the course of the year. Those are your homers, your doubles, the balls that you play hard. And so in order to be successful, you got to come up with like 120 to 130 hits a year. And so you're having to get like 60 or 70 hits when you're not on time. And so either late or early. And so that's why we preach, keeping the barrel behind the ball a long time. So I'm not afraid to tell a guy to swing down on the ball if he has a tendency to be an upswinger, and I'm not afraid to tell a guy to hit a ball in the air if he's a severe downswinger. So we just try to, that to me is the most important thing in the swing is how your barrel is moving into the strike zone and how long you can keep your barrel in the strike zone.
You were talking earlier about, I loved you said we can still bunt. I mean, they don't bunt a lot in the big leagues anymore. They almost feel like you're giving away an out. I think no, you're bunting to get a guy in scoring position. Hitting is hard. It's hard to actually get a guy over and get him in. And I also feel like nowadays there's so much, guys are punching out 200 times. Like, oh yeah, but he's got a great OPS. He punched out 200 times, but his OPS is still over 800. Now, I don't buy that stuff. So, for you with your players, do you have a 2-strike approach? And what is your feeling about the strikeout?
Yeah, I mean, strikeouts are not good. I think if you just, despite all of the things that would tell you, well, they're just another out, it's not true, because when you put a ball in play, you put pressure on the defense. And if you look at the teams that are in the Major League playoffs right now, I guarantee you they're at the very top of the league in balls in play. And, you have to put the ball in play to put pressure on the defense to create opportunities for yourself. Because, it makes even more sense to concentrate on that at the big league level, because, you're not going to, many times you're not getting 3 and 4 hits in a row to score a run. You need some help. You need an error. You need, you take advantage of a walk. But you've got to be able to put the ball in play to put pressure on the defense. And so, the bunt makes a lot more sense in amateur baseball because, as you referenced, if you bunt in the big leagues, you're probably out because the defense is really good. But if you bunt in college or in high school, for sure, the ball is just as likely to end up in the right field corner as it is in the first base pit. So it's a way that you can put pressure on the defense. You make those guys have to make plays. I mean, even I was watching the game last night when the Red Sox, they ended up winning the game. They got a man on first base, and Cora called for a bunt, and it was well executed. And the pitcher, even on a routine play, almost threw the ball into right field. I mean,
Right.
He made an awkward throw, and it ended up putting a guy in scoring position, which in a situation like that puts a tremendous amount of pressure on all the defense and on the pitcher. So there's a psychological component to it also that comes into play when it's much easier to pitch with a guy on first base only than there is with a guy in scoring position. So, and I know all the analytics guys have looked at that stuff, and I'm sure the numbers bear out. That you may be more likely in some instances to score from first with nobody out than you are from second with one out. But by the same token, I still think in certain situations the bunt is a great play, and we're certainly going to be taking advantage of that.
Now do me a favor, bro, because when I watch the college games sometimes, like, everyone looks like Tom Brady out there. They're like opening up guys that throws a pitch. Next thing you know, he's looking at this card. He pulls a card on his wrist or out of his back pocket. The center fielder's checking out where he's going to play. I mean, are you going to do that, or are you going to just play regular 150-year-old baseball and, hey, let's go get them, boys?
Yeah, I mean, we're gonna play with intelligence, but we're not going to take our science project out onto the field. So we're gonna and I think part of that, some of the stuff, it's almost like the good baseball players back when we played instinctively did these things that are now being sort of handed to the modern day player. And the problem with that is they become dependent on it, and they never have to learn the nuances of the game. And so it's like, well, if I'm always depending on a card for my positioning, then I never learn how to pay attention to the game situation, to who's hitting, to who my pitcher is, to what those tendencies are. You never have to think about the game in a sophisticated way. And to me, especially at the college level, that will inhibit their development as good baseball players. So what my goal as a coach is just to make 8 or 9 coaches that I send out there on the field, guys that are aware of situations, that are paying attention to who's hitting and to where they should be and to what the count is and what is likely to happen. And so we're going to try to teach them all of those things. And then, of course, if we look out there and you see somebody grossly out of position, obviously we're going to try to move them into what we consider to be the best defensive formation. But I do think it slows the game down. It's kind of like guys pulling a big list out of their back pocket. I mean, just watch the game and understand what's going on, and a lot of that stuff could be eliminated.
Yeah, I love it. I love it, man. Well, brother, I'm excited for you. I know it's a new phase for you in your life. I think you're going to be awesome as a head coach. I want to see if I can come back and maybe I could, if you need DH or something, I could take the field for Houston Baptist.
Got any eligibility? I mean, I'm ready. Sure. You might have to shave that gray goatee you got wearing.
Hey, just for men, bro. A little just
That's
for men.
right.
You never know. Berkey, I want to go back to talk about influences on you. I mean, obviously, we talk about you having now influence on kids being a college coach, but I want to go back to you as a child and back to your relationship, especially with your dad, Larry, and what he brought to you. Like, can you talk about his influence on you as a hitter, as a baseball player, as a man, and what lessons have you brought forward, maybe to your kids?
Man, my dad, he was fundamental in my character development, my development as a hitter, and just he coached me until I think the last year he coached me when I was 12 or 13, but he was great at teaching not just the hitting part of the game, but I mean I remember little things that he always used to say. He's like, look, if you can't beat him with your bat, beat him with your legs, or beat him with your glove, or beat him with your arm. Just always be looking for a way to win the game. And he taught the whole game, not just one aspect of it. And one of the things that I think is a detriment to the young players today is, they grow up in the cage and they grow up, in a lab, a pitching lab. And so everybody loves mechanics and it's really, focused on that one aspect of the game, but you lose the ability to really play the game of baseball as a winning baseball player. My dad was really good at instilling that. He came up with what he called the 5 C's of baseball, and it was commitment and courage and concentration and conditioning, those things that go into making a good baseball player. And he would harp on those. And, he's a guy that, he's the one that started me switch hitting. He recognized I was a left-handed thrower and a right-handed hitter. And he was like, man, that's a bad combo, to try to do something to give this guy a little bit of an advantage. So he turned me around and made me hit left-handed from the time I could walk, basically. So, and he threw it out, throwing batting practice to me. So, and just, beyond the baseball stuff, just watching the way he went about his business, just a man of integrity and just a very steady, solid, always did the right thing, always said the right thing, treated my mother well. Just the way that I watched him live his life was hugely impactful on me growing up and continues to be to this day.
So when I go back and look at your story, I think that relationship with your dad is so cool, because I know for me, people said, why do you love baseball? Well, my dad loved baseball, and it was like something we did together, was whether throwing on the side of the house, going to take grounders or hitting, which is so cool. And I look at your story too, Berkey, because like I said, man, you're one of the greatest hitters this game's ever seen, and I know that I've ever played against. And when you got to high school, though, when you played and you hit well for a nice average, you still hit a few home runs, but come recruiting time, it seemed like a lot of people weren't recruiting you. I know I kind of had the same story. As soon as I'd hit a ball in the gap, and they'd see me put my arms and start running like this.
They wanted to sign you up to be a speed skater.
They're like, this guy want to be in the Olympics.
No joke. Like, you could give Apollo Ono a run for his money on the ice with that technique. I mean,
well, that's why the scouts didn't like me either. I'm like, bro, did you just see that rocket I hit the left center? They're like, yeah, but you look like you're speed skating in quicksand. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? You know what I mean? So I know the feeling of not really being recruited, and Richmond, I end up, getting to University of Richmond. Thank you, Mark McQueen and Coach Atkins, for coming out to see me play. Because I sent 30 letters, Berkey, my dad was like, hey, if they're not going to come to you, you go to them. So I end up sending 30 letters to D3, D2, whoever would listen, Fed leagues, you know what I mean? and Division and University, my dad at the end was like, send one to University of Richmond. So University of Richmond ended up come see me play. I went 4 for 4, 8 ribbies, and that's how I got a really small scholarship to the University of Richmond. And I look at your story, how you ended up at Rice. It seems similar to my story. Can you talk us through that a little bit about how you ended up getting to Rice?
Yeah, I mean, back in those days, unlike now, there wasn't as much exposure. There wasn't video. There wasn't all the things that, there wasn't the select travel ball where there's teams from all over that come to one location where everybody can see them. So, there's more likelihood of players sort of falling through the cracks, good players. Now it's not as easy to find those late bloomers or those guys that are really going to be good, because everybody knows about everybody. So, but back then, a lot of times, like I didn't really put together a great high school season until my senior year, even though I had a decent high school career. I was on the varsity as a freshman, so it wasn't like I was terrible.
Yeah.
But just, it wasn't like I did anything that was eye-popping until my senior year. And, at that time, there was a scout named Randy Taylor who was the cross-checker for the Texas Rangers, and he was responsible for the area that I was in. And he and Coach Graham at Rice were good friends, and so they had a relationship where Randy would say, hey, Coach, you need to look at this guy, or I really think this guy's going to be good. And so my story is, and of course I didn't find this out until much later, because I just gotten a call from Rice sort of out of the blue, and they asked me to come down and visit campus. And so, but what had happened was Randy had seen me play, and he thought, man, this guy's going to be a good hitter. So he called Coach Graham. He said, man, you got to sign this guy. And so Coach Graham, to his credit, and I guess just about trusting the right people, they offered me a scholarship, and he had never seen me play. I mean, the first time he ever saw me play was after I'd already committed to Rice. And so, I wasn't kind of similar to your story, wasn't getting hardly any looks from anybody. The only other school that I'd gotten some interest from was Memphis, which we played in a tournament in Tennessee between my junior and senior year in high school, and I had a good tournament. So the Memphis coach had reached out to me. But other than that, I really kind of always wanted to go to A&M because my grandfather went there, and loved the Aggies growing up and that kind of thing. But didn't get any attention from them. Texas, nothing from Texas. Then even though I grew up in Austin, right there. So it was like, hey, I'm getting an opportunity to go to a place that's sort of an emerging program, and I'm sure glad I did, because I wouldn't have wanted to play for anybody else but Coach Graham, one of the great college coaches of all time. So,
bro, when you mentioned Coach Graham, like, I just can't stop laughing, because dude, some of the stories you have of Coach Graham are like some of the funniest stories I've ever heard in my life. Can you take us in there, the relationship? Maybe a young Lance Berkman when, coming into college. Can you just give us a couple great Coach Graham stories? Because they are legendary.
Well, Coach Graham, he was tough. He was when I talk about my baseball career, I give my dad a lot of credit because he's the one that got me started playing, taught me the game and all that. But Coach Graham's the one that really kind of took me from a raw, mentally more than anything else, kind of a raw, maybe immature kind of guy, and really taught me how to be mentally tough to the level that you have to be to succeed, when you go into pro ball and ultimately at the big league level. So, but his methods were very, let me just say this, if he coached in today's era, he might make it 6 months before he would be canceled. This guy was like, off the chain when it came to the things he would say. One of the stories that I like to tell to kind of illustrate my freshman year, we were playing Baylor, and it was one of those games where down here in Texas it's so hot and humid, especially later in the season, and we come off the bus and it's like 1,000 degrees, and we're having to play a doubleheader against Baylor. This is back in the old Southwest Conference days, and I was a freshman, and I normally played left field, but when we had this left-handed pitcher, or he was our first baseman, he was also a left-handed pitcher, so when they would put him into pitch, I would come in to play first. And so we get locked in this battle with Baylor. And back in those days, you played a 7-inning game and then a 9-inning game in the doubleheader. And the 7-inning game took 4 hours, and the final score ended up being 21-18. Straight barn.
Oh my God.
It was ridiculous. And so the winning play, it was 18-18 heading into the bottom of the 6th inning. And so Baylor's the home team, and they brought in our first baseman to pitch, and so went to first, and the first guy gets on base, so I'm holding the guy on, and they have this left-handed hitter, and he hits an absolute missile. I'm talking about like as hard as you can possibly hit a ground ball. And in my mind, I felt like I did everything I could. I felt like I laid down in front of it. I wanted it to hit me, but somehow it got under my glove and ended up trickling into the outfield. So instead of it being at least getting one out of it, maybe even a double play, now it's first and third, nobody out, and they go on and they score 3 runs that inning, and we lose 21-18. Yes. So between games, Coach calls us down the right field line, and he started, and of course, in a game like that, there are plenty of guys that need to be yelled at, mainly the pitchers, giving up 18 runs or 21 runs. But he's like screaming at guys, and so when he was getting one of those modes, you really wanted to kind of get it over with at the front of the lecture, because by the time he got down to he really worked up. So he's and I'm sitting Indian style in the front of this little gathering, and it's 1,000,000,000 degrees. We still have a 9-inning game. It's like, so he's yelling at guys, and I'm thinking, I don't remember exactly what my stat line was that game, but I had 3 or 4 hits and drove in like 5 or 6 runs. We scored 18 runs. I thought, man, I had a great day. And so wasn't even thinking about the play. So he gets to the end of the deal, and I'm thinking he's about to turn us loose, to get ready to play the next game. And all of a sudden he goes, "And Mr. Berkman." And I was like, oh my gosh, you're talking about the sense of dread just descended. And so I was like, oh man, what's he going to say? Then he gets like psycho calm, like the calm where I would much rather yell, like scary. Yeah. And he goes, "Let me ask you guys a question. How many of you idiots have read Scarlet Letter?" And we're like, "What?" But it was Rice, so everybody put their hand up like everybody had read the Scarlet Letter. And so he goes, "Well, for those that haven't read it, in the story, there's a woman and she commits adultery. And the townspeople get together and they sew a big red letter A on the front of all of her dresses because they want everyone to know that she's an adulteress. Well, Mr. Berkman, I'm going to petition the NCAA and see if they'll let me sew a big red letter C on the front of your jersey because you're nothing but a coward. I'm talking about ballistic. And at this point, like, I have my head down like this. The next thing I know, he's on hands and knees, screaming up underneath my, like I'm trying to like shield myself with my cap brim, but he's like laying on the ground, screaming up into my face. You know? And anyway, it was, you know, for a freshman, and I was like, man, I had a good.
Oh my god.
That was anyway. That's a fairly typical example of the type of thing that would happen, you know, with Coach Graham at Rice.
Oh my God,
that's amazing.
That is unbelievable, unbelievable.
Yeah, you know, Coach is super smart, and this guy's read more books than anybody I know, and so like there was nowhere you could go to be safe from him because he knows everything about everything. So it's just like he's gonna get you.
What about the story? I believe you were playing left field, and garbage came into play. And can you tell us that story about when you were playing outfield?
That was the next year at TCU, and so my freshman year we had a really good team, and we ended up finishing runner-up in the regional. We made the first regional ever in Rice history, but we had 4 guys on that team that ended up playing the big leagues. We had Jose Cruz Jr., Mark Quinn, who played with the Royals, myself, and Matt Anderson, who was our closer. And so we had that year, and our team was really old. Like, we had a lot of seniors, juniors, and seniors on the team. So the next year, we kind of had to reload. So we had a lot of young guys, and it was a rocky year. And we got into a stretch of conference play where we lost 8 straight conference games. So, like, to lose a conference game would put Coach Graham sort of in panic mode. Lose 8 straight. So you can imagine the state of affairs at this point. But our 8th loss, we got swept at Texas 4 games, and then we went into TCU to play, and this is the 4th game, and I'm playing out in the outfield, and it's a tie ball game in the 8th inning, so we're desperate for a win, and the wind was blowing like 40 miles an hour. I mean, it was like a 3-club wind blowing from right field across my face to the left field corner, and so they pinch hit this big lefty, nobody on, nobody out, and he hits this towering, slicing fly ball into left center. So I turned to my left, and I'm like tracking this ball, and all of a sudden the wind caught it with that lefty spin, and it kind of blew it back over my head. So I ran what we call a Magellan route, kind of around the world. Now I'm chasing it, and I'm running after it, and the harder I run, it's like the harder the wind's pushing it away from me. And right when I got to thinking, well, I might have a play on this ball, so I go to dive for it. And I didn't realize, but I had run all the way into the corner. And in those days, the foul pole was in play. Like, it was a pole that was physically on the field. So I go, like, sliding into this pole. I missed the ball, of course. And I have this kind of this big collision with this pole, which obviously the pole won that. And matters where gets tangled up in the fence, like rooting around for the ball on hands and knees. Because one of the things my dad taught me when you're a kid is even if you have a bone sticking out, like, you get the ball in first and then worry about it. So now, like, I'm desperately trying to do that, and I'm pretty sure I have a broken leg. And like, so the wind had pushed all this debris into the corner. And so I'm like, it was like the garbage scene from Star Wars, you know, where I'm like rooting through this garbage, trying to find the ball, and the shortstop is begging me for the ball. He's like, you know, and then it was like the guy that took Happy Gilmore's jacket. He's rounding second, and, you know, it's just like this big lumbering guy. This guy's going to get an inside the park homer. So I finally locate the ball, and it's sitting on top of a plastic grocery bag. And that's the reason why I couldn't see it. It's because of white ball, white bag. So I find it. I go down, I pick the ball up, and when I do, I grab part of the bag. So now I've got this streamer, like, blowing in front of my face. I know I can't throw this whole thing together. So I, like, shake the ball, and the bag comes loose. Well, then I go to throw it, and I kid you not, the bag blows around my comes right out in front of me, and I threw the ball right into the plastic bag. And the ball goes like 10 feet. I mean, it literally 10 feet. And the look on my shortstop's face was one of just absolute despair and just he was incredulous. Couldn't believe it. The guy was inside the park homer. Okay, so that ends up being the winning run. And so now, like, you know, I figured out at this point, okay, your leg's not broke. I got myself unhung from the fence. I'm getting to my feet, and I look up, and Coach Graham is on a dead sprint from the third base, the left field line, coming to me. And I'm thinking in my mind, like, he's coming to check on me. I just had you know, don't worry about it. And from about 30 feet away, he stops and he goes, "I'm not out here to check on you. You're the worst outfielder I've seen in my entire life." And turns around and sprints back. So I was like, all right, cool.
Oh, my God.
Game over.
Oh, my God. It's legendary, man. Oh, my God. The Coach Graham stories. When Berkey gets going into Coach Graham stories,
amazing.
Like, we were together last year. I was literally crying from from these stories, man. And, like, for our listeners to hear these stories is absolute gold. Are you going to bring any of that Coach Graham to your kids?
Yeah, no, and I told Coach, I've texted with him and talked to him since I took the job. You know, a lot of the things that Coach, obviously, to me, he's like a baseball genius because what he was able to do at Rice. And Rice is such a small school. They haven't ever once squatted anything. And he ended up winning a national championship there in 2003, which is really remarkable. After winning 5 junior college national championships where he was, you know, at San Jacinto Junior College. So a lot of the things that Coach did were great, and they were really good for me. So I'm absolutely going to try to incorporate a lot of the things I learned from Coach. Now, I probably won't be, you know, sprinting out to the outfield to yell at him. You know, like he's the worst player he's ever seen. You know, worst recruiting mistake I've made. I mean, he dropped that on me one time, like, you know, "You're the worst recruiting mistake I've ever made."
Oh my God. That's amazing.
Oh, what I love, if you're the worst recruiting mistake he's ever made, how about after 3 years at Rice, Berkey hit 385 with 67 homers and 272 ribbies? That's a really good mistake. If Coach Graham recruiting like that.
Coach was so good. Like, you know, I was the worst player, so, you know.
Oh, my God. Didn't you hit like 6 homers in a day for him once? Seriously,
I did.
double?
It's funny because that was the day that there was sort of this transformation. So he was all over me my freshman year and then the first part of my sophomore year. But we hit, or we were playing UMass, and I hit 6 homers in a doubleheader. He said, "Well, I'm glad that you took time out of your comedy routine to actually concentrate and hit 6 homers." But from that point forward, he kind of left me alone. So that was my escape from Coach Graham's wrath.
Oh my God!
Oh my God! So good, Berkey. So after your junior year, obviously you're about to get drafted because you're one of the greatest players that Coach Graham's ever recruited at this point. And you become the 16th pick of the Astros in the first round in the 97 draft. Boy, I looked at there's not many places that you didn't rake, but I look back at your minor league numbers. What was the biggest transition for you from college ball to the minor leagues?
Going from metal to wood was a little bit of a transition because, especially the aluminum bats that we were using back then, it was, you just had to touch it and you had a base hit or maybe even a homer. I mean, the sweet spot was, it was like a watermelon toothpick. Yeah. I mean, so coming into pro ball, the first adjustment is just the wood bat and learning how to get a little bit more accurate with the barrel because the sweet spot's not really as big. But it was funny because I was so locked in that year, my junior year, that when I went to pro ball, it kind of carried over. Now I didn't hit 400, but I mean, I think I hit 11 or 12 homers in a short, in half a season with the high A team. And so it was just, I had a ton of confidence going and there was a small adjustment period there, obviously going from metal to wood, but it happened pretty quick. I tell you, to me, the biggest adjustment in my minor league stint was going from A ball to double A. I'll never forget the first game in AA, we opened in Tulsa playing the Drillers, and Todd Van Poppel was pitching. And he's throwing 96 to 100. I mean, and he threw me a fastball that I normally would just have felt like I should have murdered. And it was like I had a hole in my bat. I swung good, and I looked at my bat like, what in the world is going on? And then it dawned on me, like, you got to shorten your swing. Like, your swing's too long. And so, like, that moment for me, understanding, hey, this is the speed of this game is different. And so you're going to have to make some adjustments. And so, that was a moment where I felt like I really worked on trying to, because left-handed especially, I was a guy that would dump the barrel a little bit early. Like, it's good to get on plane early, but sometimes I'd be on plane too early, and I would end up lugging the bat through the zone instead of, like, throwing my hands. And so I felt like at that point I had to make a little bit of an adjustment to, shorten the swing a bit and to be competitive for that level. And so that was a moment I remember.
Wow. Well, it is funny. Those kind of moments where, as a hitter, you're like, if I don't make this adjustment, I'm not hitting these elite guys. Like, I might hit the guys that are good, but I'm not getting to the big leagues if I don't hit the Todd Van Poppels, if I don't hit the guys that are throwing 96, 98 miles an hour,
Well, and to me, that's like the art of hitting, is understanding what needs to happen to give yourself at least a competitive chance. And so it's like one of the things I get irritated with my guys about is, even off the tee, I'll tell them, hey, we'll put a tee ball right down the middle, and I'll say, hit the ball back up the middle. And they'll take like 7 or 8 swings and pull it right into the side net. And I'm like, dude, you're taking the same swing every time. Like, you have to make some kind of an adjustment to be able to do what I'm asking you to do. And so I think having that ability to recognize, okay, here's the problem. Here's the hitting problem. What can I do to give myself a competitive advantage? Just a perfect example. Like I incurred the wrath of Albert Pujols and Mike Matheny with the Cardinals because Mike's first year. I'm sorry. Well, Mike wasn't there yet. It was because Albert left that year. It was Tony and Albert. We were having a hitters meeting in St. Louis, and we were talking about Aroldis Chapman, and I was like, dude, this guy's better than everybody we have on our team. And of course, that's why Albert, I think, took a little exception to it. I said, but if you're going to hit this guy and you go up there with your normal approach, he's going to throw it right by you. Like, you've got to do something to give yourself a chance. And I said, here's what you got to do. If you get him into a 1-0 count, you're going to guess heater, and you're going to start swinging when he shows you his rear end. And then you hope that, he throws it somewhere close to the strike zone. I mean, that was literally the plan. And they're like, oh, no, that's not a good plan. I'm like, I'm telling you, that's how you hit this guy. And so sure enough, we get in the game, and he comes in, and I got a 1-0 count, and he showed me his rear. I started swinging, and I kid you not, I hit a bullet right down the first baseline as a right-handed hitter. But, I mean, I thought I was swinging at it as he was letting it go, and it was so hard that I caught it, like, way back behind me, took it out of the catcher's mitt, and shot it right down the line. But if I hadn't done that, like, I'd have been out. I'd have swung right there, So those are the kind of things that you have to be able to make those adjustments and understand, hey, look, I'm overmatched right here, and I need to do something to give myself a chance.
Yeah, did you go into the dugout and say, hey, check me out, Albert? I know I'm
No. Well, I'm one of those guys that's kind of like, okay, I just demonstrated it. No need to say anything else.
Nice. Love it, dude. You talked about tee drills, and I love this too, because when I work with some of my sons' teams, I'll flip to the kids, or we'll do tee work, and I'll say, listen, I want you to take it to the opposite field, in the air, on a line, into that corner of the cage, on the long cage drill. And these kids will pull 3 balls in a row, and I'm like, and what I say to them was like, well, first off, that's the opposite of what I'm asking you to do. And second off, if you pull 2 balls after you try to go to the opposite field gap, you got to question yourself and say, what do I need to do here, adjustment-wise, right, to do what I'm supposed to be doing? I think the adjustment part of baseball and doing it quicker, than everyone else, that's how you end up becoming a better player.
Yeah, well, my theory on that is I don't think kids today, and again, anything I say, I'm painting with a broad brush, and so there's obviously always exceptions, and not everybody does this, but I think it's generally speaking, there's not as much free play today as there was when you and I were growing up. And what I mean by that is, we were constantly playing yard football or basketball against each other, or wiffle ball against each other, without any referee, without any adult, supervision or instruction. And so, like, if you're playing yard football and your buddy's faster than you, about the third time he runs right by you, well, you're going to give him about a 10-yard cushion, so he can't do that anymore. I mean, you learn how to make these competitive adjustments on the fly that give yourself a chance to, do what the task is. And I feel like that, at least my coaching experience has been that everybody wants a A plus B equals C. And some of that is a result of this hunt for the holy grail of hitting mechanics or pitching mechanics, where kids grew up in a cage. And it's like, if you just do, if you just execute these mechanics, you're going to turn into Mike Trout. I mean, that's not reality. But everybody's looking for that. And so if something happens off script, there's less ability to make those adjustments that we're talking about kind of on the fly, which to me, to be a great baseball player, you have to do that, because baseball at the end of the day is more art than science. I mean, there's numbers and all that, but it's an art, and you have to learn how to see what's happening and react to that accordingly, and to try to put yourself in a position where you have a chance competitively. And I don't see as much of that willingness or ability to make those adjustments. A funny story, when I finished, I went back to Rice to get my degree to finish up, because I knew that I would need to have it if I wanted to coach in college. And I was helping out with the Rice team, and we had this guy in particular, and I had him in the cage, and I was like, all right, we're hitting this ball back up the middle. Ball right down the middle off the tee. Barrel hook, barrel hook, barrel hook, barrel hook. About the fourth time, I was like, that ain't it, that ain't it, that ain't it. And so finally, after about the sixth or seventh time, I said, look, I will give you $1 million if you can hit this ball off the back net. And I don't care what you do. Just hit it off the back net. Dude, he hooked another one right in the corner. I was like, I mean, if somebody had made me that offer, I'd have squared all the way around.
Batista.
They just wouldn't do it. So I don't know. But maybe I'm not a very good coach.
Real quick, we had Dante Bichette on, and what you guys are talking about right now, it's a pretty good comp. He comped the way some coaches are teaching hitting these days to trying to teach a tennis player only to hit forehand winners. And so basically, here's my swing, it's done. I'm the best forehand winner hitter in tennis, but if you throw it to my backhand, I can't make that adjustment because I haven't practiced it.
Yeah, well, I call that the wooden Indian swing. I mean, like, if you gave a wooden Indian a bat and just spun it on its axis, and the bat comes through in one plane, and if the ball hits it, great, and if not, you're out. I mean, it's just, you're seeing a lot of that. And I actually think the shift has something to do with that, because guys they're like, look, I mean, if I hit a ball on the ground, I'm out, so why not try to hit it 17 rows deep? But it's, the state of the game now, especially from a hitting standpoint, there's a lot of challenges. The pitching's better. You guys are throwing harder. There's more specialty relievers, as far as bringing back when we played, you could count on facing a starter probably 3 times. And if you had to face him the 4th time, that meant he was really good. But now these guys are facing starters once or twice, and then they got to make an adjustment to a reliever and then another reliever. And so I'm not trying to say, the game's not easy, but for sure, some of the things that are being taught now are counterproductive. And I think, being able to have the ability to adjust the barrel mid-swing is a skill that elite hitters have and a lot of guys don't have. And so, one of the things I like to do to teach that is play pepper. When I was a kid, we grew up.
Yes.
We played pepper all the time. And you learn how, I'm going to hit a ground ball here, I'm going to hit a guy this one, I'm going to hit a guy, so you're learning how to manipulate the barrel mid-swing, which all good hitters have an ability to do.
So we talked to Dimitri Young recently, and I thought Dimitri was one of the great, best pure hitters I played against. And he's coaching high school. And we were talking about, what do you do with the kids? Well, first thing they do is they play pepper. And I'm like, man, what a lost art. Like, biggest thing about striking out is you're losing the feel for the barrel. You don't know where the barrel is. Man, if you played pepper every day for even 15 to 20 swings, whatever, every guy got 15 to 20 swings times 7, that's 140 swings a week. Then you do the math times month, 1 month, 2 months. All of a sudden, you start learning where the barrel is. And I think pepper is something that, that we need to keep doing. I love that you're doing that.
And it's fun. It's fun.
It's so fun. It's so fun. It keeps it's good for fielding and hitting.
The good news is here's what's going to happen. You know, the major league teams have sort of forced out the former players, so all the former players that want to coach are going to the lower levels. You know, and so
that's awesome.
They're going to end up the pendulum will swing back the other direction because you're going to have better instruction at the lower levels than there's ever been.
That's awesome. Great.
They
point.
need it. Speaking of instruction and bat path, I thought this drill that you talked about, you told me that you did when you were coming up and in the cages. Can you talk about that tee drill that you did when you would put the ball, I think you said you put it like 10, 15 feet up on the opposite side, on the going the other way side, and you would try to hit the ball off the tee into that ball. First off, why did you do that? What was your thought process there?
Well, that's a corrective drill. So the drill is you have a tee and you have the ball, I like to put the tee always when I'm working as low as it can go because it makes guys stay down in their legs better. But so I put the tee low, I put it down the middle, and then I'll roll another ball out on the ground. So if it's a left-handed hitter, I'll roll a ball basically like towards the shortstop. Or if it's a right-handed hitter, I'll roll a ball towards the second baseman. And it needs to be 10 or 15 feet away from the tee. And then I'll instruct the hitter to hit the ball that's on the tee into the ball that's on the ground in the direction of the shortstop or the second baseman, depending on the handedness of the hitter. And so what that does, most guys have their swing flaw is they come up and they go to the pull side. So the barrel is moving up. If you're a right-handed hitter, most guys swing where the barrel's moving up and to the third baseman severely. So I'm trying to make you feel the barrel moving down and to the second baseman severely. And what ends up happening, I've seen more beautiful line drives hit when guys are trying to do that because it planes their swing out. So if they're used to swinging severely up and across, when I make them swing down into the opposite field, what ends up happening is they get sort of in the middle, which is where you want them to be. So you're trying to make them feel something, and to their mind, it feels extreme and extremely opposite, but it's really the right way to swing the bat. So when I teach hitting, or when I'm talking to guys about teaching hitting, I tell them, look, you always have to keep in mind there's a difference between feel and real. So what I feel like's happening is not really what's happening. So,
yes. Oh, that's so good.
I would think as a left-handed hitter, I was thinking I'm hitting straight down on top of the ball. But really, if I look at a video of my swing's working up. But in my brain, I had to tell myself to swing down to get the swing that I wanted, to keep from dumping my barrel behind and those kind of things. So I will tell guys that right out of the chute, you're going to feel like you're chopping a piece of wood, but you're really not. Your swing is planed out like you need it to be. So never forget there's a difference between feel and real. And that's why it's hard for somebody that really hasn't hit to look at video and teach hitting, because you have to know what that feels like, or some of the things that you can, sort of internalize as a hitter to be able to communicate that to other hitters. That is so,
Berkey, that is so good. I had to write that down because I'm gonna use that. But the feel versus real, I mean, that is so true. And I know for me, sometimes I would cast my hands out too quick. I'm like, man, I'm just cannot stay back on that plane where the barrel's staying back. I used to think sometimes I would almost like do the Chris Taylor. I would dump my barrel back here on the movement to the ball, and it would allow me to delay just a little bit, but it worked. But you would never teach that, to dump the barrel. You would never teach a guy, hey, listen, once you get on the tee, you dump the barrel. But for me, at that time, when I was bringing my hands too forward, I just couldn't stay back on off speed. I was jumping out to the ball. I started to think, okay, your first movement when the ball's coming is dump your barrel back. And I started raking for a few weeks, and I thought, you would never teach that? It's feel versus real, right? It's just that's what I had to do.
Yeah.
Right?
It's funny you say that, because I have a kid on my team right now. I told him to do the same thing. Like, feel like you're dumping your barrel behind you, because he's such a severe down and across. I want him to feel more locked in his swing. So, I mean, it's, absolutely. Hitting and teaching hitting, it's not a one-size-fit-all deal. I mean, you can't have like one hitting philosophy that you try to broadly apply to a group of hitters, because you're going to have some upswingers, you're going to have some downswingers, you're going to have some guys that come out of their legs, you're going to have some guys that get stuck on their backside. So you've got to learn how to recognize what the particular dysfunction is and come up with ways to combat that with each individual hitter.
Oh man, this is just. I mean, we could talk hitting all day. It's just such good stuff, and I'm learning a ton. Man, I wish we would have talked more when we were playing. We talked a lot, but we should have talked more hitting.
Well, one thing you never had to worry about is your legs were always good and stretched out in the box. Like, you never had a tight there was no chance of pulling a muscle coming out because they were always stretched out good.
Well, that's why I ran so well, because my pre-pitch routine, stretch, hamstring left, hamstring right, double chicken wing. I'm like, what the heck am I doing? But I couldn't stop doing it because it was my routine.
I know I shouldn't be doing this, but I can't stop it. I got into a compulsion one year where the plate had to be totally clean. Like, it would, if there was a piece of dirt on the plate, I had to clean it off. It was like this weird OCD thing, and I couldn't hit if I knew there was a speck of dirt on the plate.
Dude, isn't that funny how you do as a hitter? You get OCD. Yeah. And like, I used to get, I would do that routine all the time. I remember my in '99 we were playing the Brewers at the end of the year with like 3 games to go. I would do my thing, Berkey, stretch to the left, stretch to the right, chicken wing, shoulder roll, and literally I was like, what the hell am I doing? But I got to do it. I got to be ready to go. This one, Berkey, we get to the Brewers. It's like biggest game of the year. We need to win it. Blah blah blah. With 7-hour rain today, come out. There's like 2,000 fans in the stands, Milwaukee County Stadium. I get in there, bam, stretch to the left, stretch to the right, chicken wing, boom, double shoulder roll, get in the box, and then I do the back leg lift, which is so ridiculous. No one's ever seen that ever. I'm like, I'm doing. So I start back leg lifting, and every time I lift my leg up, and the Brewers fans go, 1! And then I'm like, what the heck? I lift it up again, 2! And I'm looking around like, what's going on here? So then I get the 3, boom, whatever. Well, it turns out Bob Uecker was telling these guys, hey, this Casey guy's coming in for the last series. I've never seen anything like it. He lifts his back leg. Let's do it as fans. Whenever this guy lifts his back leg, let's chant 1, 2, 3. So they were so in my dome on my 4th at bat. It was the only time in my career I didn't lift my leg. They were like, boo!
Thanks a lot, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, this isn't funny. I'm trying to focus here. Crying out loud.
Right. I got to lift my leg. Look, I got to do it, Bob.
It's ridiculous. So, Berkey, you rake in the minors, dominate there, bring all your techniques that you're talking about here. Tell us about the call, because I think that's one of the biggest things for a big league ball player is, man, where were you? Who told you were going to the big leagues, and who did you call, to let them know?
Yeah, so that I was in AAA with the Zephyrs in New Orleans, and that was in '99. And that year, they were putting together the Olympic team that was going to play in 2000. So there was a qualifying tournament at the Pan Am Games up in Canada, and so the guys that they thought might be on that 2000 Olympic team, because that was like I think the first year they let pro guys play. Maybe it was '96, but I think it was 2000 was the first year that pro guys could play. So they had chosen me as being one of those guys. So in the middle of the season, there was like a 2-week break, or the players that were going to play on that USA team took a 2-week break, and we were supposed to fly to Arizona, have a like a mini spring training, and then go straight to Canada and play in this tournament. So I'm on the plane from New Orleans to Phoenix, and back in those days, I think it was like the first cell phone, the one that came with its own radio, man.
Yeah.
I'm like, we need some air support. I was telling this. That cell phone back then. So we land in Phoenix, and my phone just is blown. You can tell when you get messages or whatever. So I pushed the button, and my wife was with me, and it was Jerry Hunsaker, and he said, "Hey, as soon as you land, call me. We're calling you up to the big leagues." Like, oh my gosh, So immediately, I'm just like super nervous, and I've landed in Phoenix, and I've got to turn around immediately and get on another plane and go back to Houston, and
wow.
So I'd call my dad, and just so some friends just to let them know what was going on, but I don't think I slept for 48 hours, literally. I mean, like the whole you remember probably how it felt like, but and walking into the Astrodome and see. Then back then, and I know I've said back then so many times, but back then, the younger players, the philosophy was you don't come to spring training with the big club unless you have a legit chance to make the team. So I'd never been around any of those guys. I'd never been to a big league spring training, even though I was the top pick or whatever, and I've been to 2 minor league spring trainings. So I'm walking into that clubhouse. You got Bagwell and Biggio and Moises Alou and Billy Spires and Billy Wagner and guys like that were that have been there forever and they're stars. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I don't know anybody. I felt so out of place and it was extremely uncomfortable. And I honestly don't have fond memories of that first stint in the big league. I didn't do as good as I thought I should. And it was tough. I mean, it was a very tough adjustment mentally and so, but fortunately I got through it.
Who'd you get your first hit off of?
Bartolo Colon.
Really?
Yeah. So the first time I played was again, we were playing interleague, the Indians back then. They were, Bartolo Colon and Jim Thome was at first, and Manny Ramirez and Roberto Alomar. I mean, it's just unreal team.
Yeah. And that was like 70 pounds less Bartolo was back then, right? He was throwing like a billion miles an hour.
Yeah.
Berkey, that's the reason I was a Cincinnati Red. I came up with that team. They're like, oh, wait a minute. Why do you go to Cincinnati? You got so many good players on this team.
and the fact that you almost killed Bob Feller. But
what?
Case. Please
What is
tell me
this?
You told that story. This is the greatest baseball story I've personally ever heard.
Berkey, I've never told this story before on this podcast.
I mean, you have to tell it. I mean, even if you have to do another show just to tell the story.
All right. I'm going to tell the story, Berkey, because I love it. This is one of the stories that we laughed our heart out. So I'm with the Indians, the team Berkey's talking about. Like, you're not cracking this lineup. It's 1998. I just hit 380 in Double A, Triple A, 97. I'm like the best prospect going. Like, I'm the guy. I'm like, boom, we're in business. I come to spring training in 98. I'm raking, and it looks like Jim Thome, I think Jim Thome's like 38. Turns out he's still 26. He already has like 300 homers. I'm like, I'm going to be out of here soon, right? So the one day I come and I'm like, you know what? I got to start impressing Mike Hargrove, who was the manager. I got to go out early. I got to get out there early. Game's at 1. I'm going to get out there at 12:20 to make sure he knows who I am, and then I'm a decent player. I don't know why that thought process was good, but that's how I was at 23. So I go rolling out there, and the only other guy in the dugout, so it was Mike Hargrove, Torey Lovello, who is the manager of the Diamondbacks. His career was about to be over, so he had the same thought process I had. I was trying to break in, he was trying to hold on, right? So we're sitting there in the dugout, and Bob Feller is a living legend, American hero, right? And he comes out every day, full uni, spikes high. He's like 79 at the time, like 80. I don't even know. He was a little older. But he comes out, and it's a full house because the Indians are the best team in baseball at the time, right? So every day we watch Bob Feller, and everyone's like, they like, ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for the greatest American hero, because he spent like 3 or 4 years of his career in his prime in World War II. Mm-hmm. Like, if I did that, my career would be over. Like, he came back and was still throwing 107, dominating people, right? So they're like, ladies and gentlemen, let's give it up for the greatest American hero of all time, number 19, Bob Feller. He'd take his hat off. 10,000 people, Winter Haven, Florida. Places going bananas, right? Well, every day a player would throw with Bob, right? Couple of nice throws. Bob's on his way. Boom, going golfing, doing what he does, whatever. So that day, Mike Hargrove's like, hey, Case, great to see you're out here early, brother. He's like, why don't you go throw catch with Feller today? I'm like, that sounds great, Mike. I'm like, I got 2 knocks in the big leagues, and if I throw catch with Bob Feller, I'll have 3 stories to tell my kids if I don't ever play in the big leagues again, because Jim Thome's the first baseman for the Indians, and I'm heading back to Buffalo soon, right? So I go out there and I introduce myself to Bob Feller. Hey, Mr. Feller, how you doing? I'm Sean Casey. Hey, nice to meet you, son. And I back up, and boom, Feller gets the ball. He throws it to me. Boom, I catch it. I throw it back. And I'm throwing it nice and easy. Boom. And Torey Lovello's like, Case. I'm like, what's up, Torey? He's like, dude, clean it up, bro. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, you're lobbing the ball to the greatest American hero of all time. You're showing him up. You're showing up, Bob Feller. You're lobbing it, rainbow throwing it. I go, you serious? He goes, yeah, give him something. So I'm like, all right.
You're playing catch with him like he's an invalid. I mean, you got tied up.
It's unbelievable. So I'm like, all right, well, at this moment, no one knows this about me but me. At this time, I kind of had the yips. Like, and if you've ever had the yips in baseball, that means, like, you can't throw the ball. Like, you're nervous to throw. Well, if you have the yips, there's 2 ways to throw the ball. You can lob it rainbow style like I'm doing to Bob and trying to get out of here unscathed, or you can throw it a little harder. There's no medium. The medium gets sailed and spiked, right? So I'm thinking to myself, okay, yeah, I'll throw it a little harder. So I start backing up, right? And fella, you can tell fellas like, the heck's this guy doing? Throw the ball. I want to go golf. I'm backing up, but I'm trying to gauge it. I'm like, if I get back far enough, I can now throw it to fella or be perfect. So I back up, boom, I get the ball. I sling it to fella, right? 4 years, World War II, dominating, comes back, nothing's ever happened to him. Bob Feller's gloves like this, right? And the ball's getting closer and closer. And I'm like, what the hell is he doing? Why is he not moving? Why is he not moving his glove? It gets closer. Boom! It hits him right in the heart. And he's like, he starts waddling. Boom! He goes down. Right? He goes down. He's face planted in the ground. And he's like, oh. He's like, oh. And I'm like, oh my God, I killed Bob Feller. I just go sprinting over. I'm like, freaking, it's as fast as I've ever run. I was like, Mr. Feller. And he's in the ground. He's like, oh my God, I killed Bob Feller. I hit him right in the freaking heart with a laser, right? Next thing I know, here comes the EMTs out of the crowd.
Oh,
my
God.
10,000 people are now on their feet, like, and I could hear him like, I was number 56 at the time. That's how good I was. Like, who's 56? Who's 56? I'm like, oh my God, I'm 56. I'm going to be known as the guy that killed Bob Feller, like not a guy that had a good career in the big leagues. So the EMTs come out, they start shaking Bob around. He's just grinding. It's like 5 minutes. I'm like, back up, son, back up. I'm like, Bob's down. It's like, it's serious now. You can hear a pin drop. I'm just like sweating profusely. Like, oh my God, I killed Bob Feller. And next thing you know, like Jim told me, now the team's out there, right? The game's closing to start. It's delayed. Tomey's like, hey, what happened here, Case? I'm like, bro, I was like, I just played catch with Bob Feller. Freaking, I threw him a ball, hit him right in the heart. He's been down. He's been down. Guy's been down for 10 minutes, right? So then, sure enough, the training staff's there, EMT, they get him to his feet, and they're like, "Oh my God!" He's up, and they get Feller to his feet. And they're like, "Bob, what happened? What happened?" He's like, "Oh man, the young lad over there, just I was golfing yesterday, and I hit my driver into the ground. I must have jammed my shoulder. The young lad threw the ball to me, maybe a little bit too hard. I couldn't get the glove over in time. Ended up hitting me right in the heart." And I'm like, "Oh dear God!" So they get Bob up. Freaking, they scooter him, into the ambulance. Off he goes to the hospital. I was sweating profusely. Number 56. I'm like, I'm never gonna get a lower number in my life. I'm such a terrible player. I got to get rid of the yips. I got to figure this out. So I start walking off. Mike Hargrove puts his arm around me. He's like, Case. He's like, man, it's your lucky day. I was like, my lucky day? Are you serious? He's like, yeah. He's like, if you'd have killed Bob Feller, bro, you definitely would have been released.
So good. That's so good.
Oh, love that story.
Oh my God. Tears.
I mean, the better version of that is when you can actually demonstrate how Bob Feller hit the ground. I mean, that's the part of it. So.
Yeah, when I do it not sitting down, I show like Bob Feller goes down, and then, it's absolute anarchy. But oh my gosh,